Good morning. Welcome to Monday morning, June the 14th. It's Flag Day today, I believe, and people will be celebrating that by putting their flags out. Today's devotion is entitled Paul's First Missionary Journey, and the verses recommended to read are from Acts chapter 14, verses 21 through 28. The verse that leads us off, however, is Acts chapter 13, verse 2. The Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." It's an interesting mission team when we already know by this point that Barnabas' name means son of encouragement, and he has been specifically mentioned as someone who sold a chunk of property and just brought the proceeds and gave it to the apostles and trusted him. You use it as best as you see fit. And then we know Saul. We know he's a hard-driving kind of guy. And we'll also learn a little bit that he could be unforgiving. So it's quite a team to be put together. Probably Barnabas. God thought, you know what? I think Saul will need a Barnabas along to keep him centered. So that's my speculation as we go in here today. Paul's first missionary journey, Monday the 14th of June. Barnabas and Saul, along with John Mark, were commissioned as missionaries by the leaders of the church in Antioch. At each of their future stopping places, Luke records something of note. In Cyprus, which was Barnabas' home, the proconsul himself believed. At Perga, John Mark deserted them and went home. On arrival in Pisidian Antioch, as we know from his letter to the Galatians, Paul was suffering from a debilitating illness, perhaps malaria, which had damaged his eyesight. Yet here Paul and Barnabas took the radical step of turning to the Gentiles. The missionaries now journeyed about 100 miles southeast to Iconium, where large numbers of Jews and Gentiles believed. In Lystra, following the healing of a cripple, the superstitious crowd now tried to worship them, but Paul urged them to turn from their idolatry to the living God of creation. Next, the crowd turned against Paul, stoned him, dragged him out of the city, thinking he was dead. Worship one moment and a lynching the next. Such is the fickleness of the crowd. But Paul revived. And the following morning, his poor battered body began the 60-mile trudge to Derbe, where large numbers again believed. Could have quit, but he didn't. Thankful. We should be thankful for that. Paul and Barnabas now retraced their steps, revisiting the churches they had planted and encouraging the young disciples. On arrival back in Syrian Antioch, they gathered the church together and reported all that God had done through them. That's in the reading for today in 1427. What was Paul's missionary policy? He's going to mention an author here who actions with another brother he went to the same college as I did, but not at the same time. Found out about him from another friend and have been very much enjoying his insights on discipleship, and he's actually mentioned this author is the author of a good book on discipleship. What was Paul's missionary policy? John Stott writes. He goes on, and from there, as Roland Allen wrote on his famous book, Missionary Methods, St. Paul's or Ours, Quote, nothing can alter or disguise the fact that St. Paul did leave behind him at his first visit complete churches, unquote. On what foundations, then, did his indigenization policy rest? There were three. Firstly, Paul exhorted the new converts to remain true to the faith. That is, there was a cluster of central truths that he calls the faith, and that he had taught them. Secondly, Paul and Barnabas appointed elders for them in each church, plural. They appointed elders for them in each church. Thirdly, Paul and Barnabas committed them to the Lord, convinced that he was able to look after his own people. Thus, the young churches had the apostles to teach them, pastors to shepherd them, and the Holy Spirit to guide and protect them. With this threefold provision, the churches could safely be left. That is challenging. That is challenging. I'm going to guess that those who are left behind, though, had a passion, had a desire, wanted, just like we saw in Acts 2, the early church on that day and the following days after Pentecost had a passion to know more, to want more. They wanted fellowship with other believers, and they wanted to know the truth. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to prayer, breaking of bread. Those are the kind of people that Paul and Barnabas must have left behind. People committed as they themselves were committed to the Lord by Paul and Barnabas. I don't know that we're trying that method anymore. That's something to think about. I'm going to think about this devotion, this challenge here that came from Roland Allen through John Stott. Are we doing what we ought to be doing as the church? Do we still understand what the significance and importance of the church is as a fellowship of believers who don't just meet for an hour or two on a Sunday morning, but who live out faith together, live out following Jesus together? Blessings to you today.